Eat black sesame. Could something this small really become a daily habit at 97? That's what I wondered when I saw how my grandma quietly keeps this ritual in her meals. She moves a little slower now, but still steady, still careful. And every time she works in the kitchen, Muffin, her little corgi, curls up near her feet like he's been part of this routine forever. When people ask how she keeps her body feeling stable as she gets older, she just smiles and points to Sesame. But why does she prepare it this way? And why does she say the body understands it better like this? Let's find out together in today's video. May God bless you and your family. Black sesame became important to her as she grew older, when bones didn't stay as strong and the body absorbed nutrients more slowly. That's why my grandma believes simple, nourishing foods matter more with age. So the first step is simple but very important. My grandma always rinses the black sesame several times to remove fine dust. She says clean food helps the body feel lighter, and she learned that from her mother many years ago. She still remembers her mother gently saying, "Take care of what you put into your body." And it always reminded her of the verse, "Do you not know that your body is a temple?" After that verse, Grandma would gently smile and say that caring for the body also means caring for the smallest ingredients we use every day. She never rushed this part. Once the black sesame is rinsed clean, I let it drain slowly, just like she did, allowing the excess water to fall away. After rinsing, she slowly toasts the sesame in a dry pan over gentle heat. She listens for the soft popping sound and waits until a deep, nutty aroma fills the kitchen. She says this gentle roasting helps wake up the natural minerals inside. If the heat is too strong or rushed, the seeds can taste bitter and lose their mild fragrance. So she always tells me, slow and steady makes it easier for the body later. Once the sesame has cooled, Grandma moves to the next step, grinding. She always says this step is just as important as roasting. If the sesame stays whole, the body can't take in all the natural goodness as easily. But when it's ground into a soft powder, it becomes gentler on digestion and easier for the body to use. She smiles and reminds me how, years ago, before electric grinders were common, she used a small hand grinder on the kitchen table. It took longer, but she said the smell of warm sesame filling the room made the work feel peaceful. Grandpa used to walk by, take a deep breath, and joke, "Smells like strength food today." She laughs every time she tells that story. When done properly, the sesame turns into a fine, fragrant powder, slightly warm, nutty, and soft to the touch. First, she pours the glutinous rice flour into a wide bowl. At this step, I add a little sugar. Sugar is not good for the elderly, but today I'm making this for the children in the family. And she stirs for about a minute with calm, steady circles. She says this first mixing wakes the flour up. She once told me that when she was young, she dumped everything in quickly and stirred fast to finish sooner. And her mother looked at the bowl and said, "Fast hands make heavy food." Grandma laughs every time she tells that story, but she never forgot it. She would often look at me and say, she hopes we're all taking gentle care of ourselves, especially as the years go by. And before moving to the next step, she always pauses and quietly says, "May God keep this home healthy, peaceful, and strong." After the flour and water come together, she melts the butter gently using a water bath, never letting it boil, just warm enough to turn liquid, because overheated fat, she says, changes the feel of the cake and makes it sit heavier in the stomach. Grandma always slows down at this moment, when the butter sits in the bowl, melting gently over warm water. When she was young, she once placed butter straight into a hot pan to melt faster. It sizzled, browned too quickly, and her mother just shook her head and said softly, "Butter doesn't like to be rushed." So now she always uses this gentle water bath. Once melted, she pours the butter into the batter and stirs again for another minute. When the melted butter flows into the bowl, she watches how it ribbons through the batter in soft golden lines. So for these quiet moments, I just keep it moving. If you stir too hard, air gets trapped and the texture turns uneven later. But when you stir gently, the mixture becomes smooth. And every time the batter turns glossy like this, she smiles and says, "Now it's ready." The kitchen feels calmer at this step, and the smell that reminds her of home. She tells me this is how food should treat the body too. Then comes the black sesame powder, the part she always treats with quiet respect. She sprinkles it in gradually and stirs for a full 2 minutes so it blends completely. She says sesame carries deep nourishment, but only if it's mixed evenly. Otherwise, the cake tastes uneven and feels dense in spots. When the sesame powder blends in and the mixture thickens, she watches the texture more than the clock. Grandma says this is the moment when the black sesame truly becomes food for the body. She laughs, remembering how once, when she was stirring seriously, like this, my grandpa walked by, looked into the bowl, and said, "Are we making cake or cement?" She pretended to glare at him and replied, "This cement is what keeps your bones standing." They both laughed, and she says that's cooking need a lot of patience. When the batter flows smoothly and looks like thick cream, she scoops out a small portion and divides it into 2 small bowls, which will become the top and bottom white layers later. She says this is what makes the cake balanced, not too heavy, not too plain, just like a good day should feel. And only when everything looks even, smooth, and calm does she move to the steaming step, which Grandma always calls the quiet cooking part. Because once the layers go in, patience does the work. She prepares the steaming tray by lining it with parchment paper so nothing sticks later. She pours the first thin layer of white batter into the tray and steams it for about 10 minutes. She says the first layer is like the foundation of a house. If it's rushed, everything above it feels unstable. When she was younger, she once opened the lid too early to check, and her mother shook her head and said, "Steam needs time, just like people do." Grandma laughs, remembering that, but she never opens the lid early anymore because sudden temperature changes can make the texture uneven. Once the first layer is set, she gently pours the black sesame batter over it and steams another 10 minutes. She says this middle layer carries the deep nourishment, so she always makes sure it spreads evenly. Grandpa used to say the dark layer looked like the strong middle of the day, and she liked that comparison. Finally, she pours the remaining white batter on top for the last layer and steams it longer, about 20 minutes, until everything is fully cooked. She says this final layer seals everything together, like calm at the end of a long day. She never rushes this part because undercooked batter can feel heavy in the stomach later. After steaming, Grandma moves to what she calls the setting step, and she says this part is just as important as cooking. Instead of cutting right away, she lets the cake cool down first. She says the cold helps the layers firm up gently, so the cake holds its shape and becomes easier to cut cleanly. When she was younger, she once tried slicing it while still warm, and the layers stuck to the knife and stretched. Her mother smiled and told her, "Warm rice is soft, but rested rice has structure." She never forgot that. Grandma usually leaves it in the fridge for several hours, or overnight if possible. She says this resting time lets the glutinous rice settle, so the texture becomes soft yet stable, not sticky or overly chewy. The next day, she lightly sprinkles white sesame seeds over the surface. She says this simple touch works like a natural barrier, helping the knife glide more smoothly and adding a gentle nutty crunch. Grandpa used to joke that the sesame on top looked like morning snow, and she still laughs when she remembers that. When cutting, she wipes the knife clean between slices so each piece keeps its neat shape. She reminds me this cake is nourishing, especially from the black sesame, but it's still made from sticky rice, which feels heavier to digest. That's why she prefers a small piece in the morning or at midday when the body handles food more comfortably. When she was younger, she once tried to cut too fast because guests were waiting, and her mother quietly said, "Food carries the mood of the hands that make it." Since then, she always slows down here. She says when you cut calmly, the slices look cleaner, and the heart feels lighter too. Grandma used to line them up one by one like small golden tiles, and my grandpa would peek over and say, "Are we serving cake or building a house?" That little joke stayed in the kitchen for years. She believed even the way food is arranged can show care. When holding a piece, she always paused for a second before eating. She would look at the sesame seeds on top and say they reminded her of the mornings when her mother toasted sesame slowly on the stove. She said the smell meant warmth, family, and strength for the day ahead. Sometimes she dipped a corner lightly into honey, saying the gentle sweetness made the cake feel softer and easier to enjoy. Grandpa used to tease her, "You're turning a simple cake into a celebration." And she would answer, "Simple food made with patience is already a celebration." She reminds me this cake is nourishing, especially with black sesame often talked about for supporting bones. And that's how this simple black sesame cake becomes more than just a recipe in our kitchen. Grandma always says habits like this are not about big changes, but about small things done gently, again and again. A little sesame, a little patience, a warm kitchen, and time taken to sit and eat calmly. That's why she still moves slowly but steadily, trusting these small daily rhythms. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If you enjoyed this, I've gathered more of my grandma's quiet kitchen habits in the playlist right here. All simple, practical, and easy to bring into everyday life. Wishing you and your family warmth, comfort, and many peaceful meals. I'll see you in the next video.